Ideas that I love talking to Joe Dispenza about. This is the third time we've had him on London Real, and he really shows me that it is all in your mind, and you've got to disrupt this negative pattern that many of us are in, that's rooted in our past story, and our past history. So we go into that. We also talk about trauma. We also talk about Joe's personal story, and even some details when it comes to parenting. So I know you're going to love this show. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Dr. Joe Dispenza, the New York Times bestselling author, international lecturer, researcher, and educator. Your work focuses on the intersection of neuroscience, epigenetics, and quantum physics, driven by the conviction that each of us has the potential for greatness. You specialize in teaching people to rewire their brains and recondition their bodies to make lasting changes. Dr. Joe, welcome back to London Real.
Thank you so much, Brian. I'm always happy to be with you.
I love having you here, and you've been here now 3 times in 2 years, which I think is more than any other guest on our show. And we have you back because people want to hear your message. And, YouTube doesn't lie. It shows what the people want. And I was wondering if you could wrap your head around that, why people are almost craving for your message. Is it because maybe they haven't found those answers in science and school and the medical profession? What do you think that is?
Well, I honestly think that we're in an age of information. And in an age of information, ignorance is a choice. And because of technology, we have access to information that was once only left to the hands of authorities, whether you're a teacher, a priest, a rabbi, a doctor, that there was a kind of a separation, that knowledge was always kept from the masses, and technology has kind of closed that gap. So everybody's informed right now. You can get answers to just about anything at your fingertips, and with the gaining of information, with the gaining of knowledge, there's a change in awareness. And awareness is consciousness, and you can't have consciousness without energy. So there's this very strong fundamental change in the energy of the way people begin to interact in their environment and in the world. So what was once considered novel just 5 years ago is old information to this day. And now, because more things are happening in a shorter amount of time because of technology, everybody's gaining information quite rapidly. And because of that, paradigms, whether it's the economy, political, journalistic, whether it's the religious model, the medical model, the environment, education, it's all beginning to come apart because that old model can't sustain itself in the changing times. So I think people right now, because they're so informed, are beginning to realize it's not enough to just know, that this is a time in history to know how. So rewind the tape 15 years ago, me standing in front of an audience. People love the information, but to get them to actually do something with it, there was this kind of general resistance to doing something with it. Well, now people want to give their time to instruction, to learn how to apply it, to learn how to take that philosophical, theoretical, scientific knowledge and personalize it, to demonstrate it, to initiate it in some way, to modify their behaviors and do something differently. And getting them to get their behaviors to match their intentions creates a new experience. And experience then is one of the things that enriches circuitry in the brain. It literally changes. I mean, learning is making connections, but experience is enriching those connections. And the side effect of a change in the circuitry in the brain when in the midst of an experience, that we begin to feel an emotion. And the emotion is the payoff from the experience. When you feel unlimited, when you feel gratitude, when you feel whole, when you feel in love with life, now you're teaching your body chemically to understand what your mind has intellectually understood. Now you're embodying the truth of that knowledge. The knowledge is actually making it into your genes, it's making it into your cells. And,
right. Without that emotion, that won't happen.
It's sterile. It's so
it's like a computer program without it.
Yeah. So if you give people numerous opportunities to connect, if you give them numerous opportunities to get beyond themselves, if you apply the science in a way that they can understand it and repeat it, they're beginning to install the circuitry in their brain in preparation for the experience. And the more they understand what they're doing and why, the how gets easier. So if you've done it once and you can understand how you did it and you can reproduce it over time, you will neurochemically condition your mind and body to begin to work as one. In other words, your body will now know how to do it as well as your mind. Now, at that point, you're beginning to master that philosophy. It's becoming a state of being. So I watch people go from a philosopher to initiate to master. I watch people go from knowledge to experience to wisdom. I witness people to go from mind to body to soul, to thinking to doing to being, to learning it with their head, applying it with their hands, and knowing it by heart. And what's happening now is that there's a very profound interest in evidence. And so we've done extensive measurements, as we've talked about in past shows, to prove.
And science is important to you. It's not important to a lot of people out there, but for you, it was always the glue that really brings this together between the logical brain and the emotional brain.
Well, I think it's a few reasons, and I'll speak very candidly. I think that science is the contemporary language of mysticism. When you start talking tradition or culture or religion, you divide an audience, but science creates community, right? Because that's the contemporary language and understanding when you combine quantum physics with neuroscience and neuroendocrinology and psychoneuroimmunology and epigenetics. All the science points the finger at possibility. So that's one reason, because I don't want people to be intimidated, because what science shows is factual, right? So they're more likely to believe in that. And the moment you use a word from some tradition or some religion or for some sect or culture, some people shut off. They don't know what that word means. And
God
it has
is one.
God, whatever, that they have a stigma about it that really limits their participation because of their past experience, because of their beliefs.
Okay.
So I try to keep it as pure as possible. And the other thing is, I think that the male brain tends to be more logical in that way. So we have a lot of men in our audience, and for me to get men to the edge a lot of times, they have to methodically understand. Women somehow intuitively know this, and they just trust a whole lot more. So men have to be led to the edge a lot of times, but that doesn't mean that women don't appreciate the science, because I think they do. I just think men need it to bridge the gap, right? So to me, we've done extensive brain scans. I now know people can change their brain in 1 hour. I've seen it. I know what a mystical experience looks like in the brain. I know how to induce it because we've studied it so much. I know when a person is in the midst of change, we can predict when it's happening. I know that people can begin to regulate emotional states and sustain them, that it can become a skill. We've seen gene changes in 4 days. We've seen immune regulation changes. We've seen telomere changes in 4 days and 60 days. That means you're lengthening your life.
And how do you measure the gene changes in 4 days?
So we did a randomized study with a group of people to measure 7,500 different gene regulations. And genes are like Christmas tree lights. They turn on and off all the time. When they regulate in a positive direction, or when they're stimulated properly, they upregulate and they make healthy proteins. And genes make proteins, and proteins are responsible for the structure and function of your body. And the expression of proteins is the expression of life.
Is this epigenetics when they kind of turn on, or you can get them to turn on?
Yeah, it's the environment outside the cell. It's the information that's instructing and selecting the gene from outside the cell. Okay. Then if the information coming from the cell, say example is a stress hormone, the gene, the cell closes down and it downregulates, and it starts making a cheaper protein, or it doesn't make the expression of proteins properly. So my interest was, okay, we now know that genes do not create disease. Less than 2% of the people on the planet are born with type 1 diabetes or sickle cell anemia or Tay-Sachs disease. The other 99 to 98% is created by lifestyle. You can get two identical twins with the same genome. Why does one die at 57, the other one die at 85? Well, different environment, different perception of the environment, different behaviors, different choices. So then I wanted to see if people began to think differently, make different choices, do different things, create some new experiences, and feel and embrace different emotions. If that was new information coming into their nervous system, into the circulatory system, into their body, Could we change the gene expression? Because we've witnessed people heal from cancer, and in a week we've seen people with MS heal in a few days. We've seen people with Hashimoto's syndrome change, rare genetic disorders change. We've seen all kinds of things change.